I won't let you decide what goodness is.
Then be ready to live with the consequences, alone.
After listening, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment before continuing. The November wind, cold and sharp, drove dry leaves along the narrow, sand-strewn road that led to Jacob Miller's bakery, where for 2 decades the smell of fresh bread had filled the morning air. It was 4 o'clock in the morning when Jacob, as he had every day for 20 years, woke without an alarm, guided by an inner rhythm honed by years of tireless work. In the bedroom, Sarah, his wife, was still asleep, her breathing so quiet, and even it felt as if she were dissolving into the darkness of their modest wooden house. Jacob dressed unhurriedly without lighting the lamp. His hands, roughened by labor, found the familiar clothes on the hook beside the bed, by themselves dark trousers, a shirt, and a heavy wool jacket that smelled of smoke and flour. When he opened the bakery door, an icy slap of wind struck his face, and something in that cold made his heart tighten with a nameless foreboding. Something was wrong. He felt it not with his mind, but with his whole body, as if the air had grown thicker, heavier. Taking the lantern from the wall, he lifted it higher, and the weak light pulled a figure out of the darkness on the threshold. A man lay on the ground. At first Jacob thought he was a corpse. The body was motionless, too motionless, as if frozen in the cold embrace of night. But when he bent closer, the lantern's trembling glow revealed a thin ribbon of steam drifting from the man's bluish lips. He was alive, but barely. He wore a battered military uniform, saturated with dark patches of dried blood that looked black in the dim light. An American soldier. Young, no older than 25, with a thin face that seemed even younger for its pallor and pain. Jacob's heart stopped for a beat, and his breath caught in his chest. He looked up and down the street, gripping the lantern so hard his knuckles went white. The street was empty. Only the wind moaned through the bare branches of old oaks swaying nearby. The first thought that flashed through his mind was sharp and frightening. Step back, retreat, pretend he had seen nothing. The war did not concern their community. They were Amish, people of peace who had renounced violence, weapons, and all that was bound up with bloodshed. This soldier, possibly a killer, was a stranger to their world, the embodiment of everything they stood against before God. Then Jacob lowered the lantern, and the light fell across the soldier's face. It was so young, almost boyish, lips cracked from thirst, with a large torn wound at the temple. "Please," the man rasped, barely audible, eyes still closed, and that small sound pierced Jacob like an arrow. He stood there, clutching the cold lantern handle, feeling 2 thoughts hammering in his head like heavy mallets on an anvil. The first, this is a sin, a violation of every principle his community believed in, for helping a soldier meant meddling in the affairs of war. The second, a human being lay before him, a human being dying on the cold threshold of his bakery. Jacob looked around again. The darkness was thick, almost tangible, and there were 2 hours until morning prayers no one would see. Sighing, he stooped and, carefully hooking his hands under the soldier's arms, felt the heat of the man's nearly burning body sear him through the coarse wool of the uniform. The man was heavy, but Jacob, used to physical work, dragged him inside the bakery, into the warm smell of flour and yeast. The soldier groaned, but full awareness did not return. Jacob pulled him behind the tall sacks of flour, into the far corner of the bakery where a small storeroom stood. That was where he kept what mattered most: pouches of seed, dried apples, and herbs Sarah used for baking. The little room was tight, cold, but dry, with sturdy wooden walls that hid it from prying eyes. Gently laying the soldier on the floor, Jacob felt the man suddenly grab his wrist. The soldier's eyes opened gray, clouded with pain and fear, but alive. "Do not turn me in," he whispered, his voice weak but packed with desperation. "They think I am a deserter, but I just could not keep killing. I could not." Jacob eased his hand free without a word. His heart thudded and his thoughts tangled. He went to the shelf, took an old wool blanket he used in winter to cover the flour sacks against damp, and spread it over the soldier, trying to bring a little warmth to the trembling body. "I will bring water," he said at last, his voice sounding dull, as if from the bottom of a deep well. As he closed the storeroom door, His hands shook as though from cold, though the bakery was warm. He had just done something that cut against everything he believed, everything his community had taught him. He had hidden a soldier, a fugitive, possibly a criminal. Worst of all, he had lied not with words, but with deeds, placing a heavy stone of falsehood between himself and God. And yet he could not leave a man to die in the snow, under the cold November wind that sang its mournful song over a sleeping community. Jacob lit the oven as he did every day. The firewood crackled. The flames slowly took. He kneaded the dough. As usual, his hands remembered every motion. But his mind was far away. Sarah came at 6, as always, to help with the baking. She looked at him closely. "Are you all right?" she asked. "You look pale." "Just slept poorly," Jacob answered, avoiding her eyes. Another lie. Through the day, he brought the soldier water and bread 3 times. The man hardly ate, only drank greedily with his eyes closed. The head wound looked bad. The edges were blackened and inflamed. Jacob needed medicine, bandages, but how could he get them without stirring suspicion? That evening, after Sarah went home to make supper, Elder Isaac Stoltzfus stepped into the bakery. Tall, gaunt, with a long gray beard, he was the conscience of their community. "Good evening, Jacob," he said in his slow, measured voice. "Good evening, Isaac," Jacob answered, heart pounding. "I have heard troubling news," the elder said, coming to the counter. "They say a deserter is hiding somewhere in the county, a soldier who escaped from a military camp. The sheriff warns everyone to be watchful." Jacob nodded, forcing calm across his face. "Of course," Isaac went on, "for us it does not change our way. War is not our concern. But if such a man appears, we must notify the authorities at once. Harboring a deserter is a crime against the state and a sin before God." "I understand," Jacob managed. Isaac bought 2 loaves and left. Before going out, he paused and looked back. "Jacob," he said quietly, "you are a good man. But remember, no good born of a lie brings salvation, only ruin." When the door closed, Jacob sank into a chair. His hands trembled so badly he had to lace them together. The soldier's name was Thomas Weaver. Over the next 3 days, Jacob learned his story piecemeal, in brief talks when he brought food. Thomas was from Philadelphia, an only son to a widow. He went to war because that was what had to be done, or so everyone said. At first, he believed the cause was just. Then, in France, in the trenches, among the screams and the blood and the mud, something inside him broke. "I killed 19 men," he said one evening, staring at the ceiling. "I counted. Each one. One of them was no older than 16. When he fell, a photograph slipped from his pocket, a girl and a baby, his family." Jacob said nothing. He did not know what to say. "I started seeing their faces when I closed my eyes," Thomas went on, "every night, and I realized I could not go on. I could not kill anymore, even if they shoot me for it." "Why did you come here?" Jacob asked at last. "I heard about the Amish, that you do not fight, that you believe killing is always a sin without excuses. I thought—" He broke off, then said more softly, "I thought maybe here I could become a person again." Jacob felt a tightening in his chest. The man was searching for redemption. So was Jacob, by hiding him. The sickness that crashed into their quiet life arrived on the 5th day after Jacob had found Thomas, the ragged soldier, hiding in the old barn behind the bakery. It struck first at little Rebecca Yoder, a 7-year-old girl with fiery red hair and freckles scattered across her pale face like stars in the evening sky. Her mother, Ruth, burst into Jacob's bakery with eyes full of panic and despair, her voice shaking as she pleaded, "Jacob, do you have anything to bring the fever down? Rebecca is burning so hot she cannot catch her breath." Jacob, trying to mask his own fear, handed her a jar of honey and a bundle of herbs he kept for his wife Sarah's baking, but deep down his heart clenched with dread. He had heard the whispers at the market, seen the alarming headlines in newspapers that occasionally reached their Amish settlement, the Spanish influenza, an unrelenting illness cutting people down faster than the guns on the fields of war. Over the next 2 days, the sickness, like a merciless reaper, took hold of 4 more members of the community, then 10, and soon Jacob lost track of how many the fever had consumed. The church benches where the community joined in prayer and hymn each Sunday now stood half empty, and harsh, tearing coughs echoed from every house like a sinister choir. People collapsed right on the dusty roads, their bodies burning with heat, strength leaving them so fast they could not reach home. Rebecca Yoder was the third to die, after old Enoch King, whose wise words had always soothed the community, and young Jacob Baylor, who only a few months earlier had stood beneath a wedding canopy with a shining smile. At Rebecca's burial, Jacob stood by the small wooden coffin, feeling the earth under his feet grow colder by the minute. Ruth Yoder wept without sound, her face ash-gray, as if carved from stone, her eyes fixed on nothing. As the coffin was lowered, someone touched Jacob's elbow, and he turned to see Elias Miller, a distant relative with a sharp chin and eyes that burned with suspicion. "A strange coincidence, is it not?" Elias whispered, his voice soft but blade thin. "The sickness arrived just when a deserter came into our area, a soldier who bears the stain of war." Jacob felt his throat tighten, but forced himself to ask evenly, "What are you saying, Elias?" Elias only smiled darkly. "I am saying God sends punishment, because someone among us hides sin, the sin of war, Jacob." The words seared his mind like hot iron, and he looked away so his face would not betray him. That evening, when Jacob brought Thomas a bowl of warm broth and a piece of bread, he saw the soldier looked worse than before. The wound on his head had started to knit, but a new enemy had moved in an insistent, light cough that would not let go. "You are sick," Jacob said quietly, fear squeezing his chest. Thomas, leaning against the barn wall, nodded, his eyes fever bright. "I knew it would come," he rasped. "Back at camp I saw the boys coughing, dropping one after another. Some died before they ever shipped out." Jacob bent closer, his voice unsteady with strain. "You need a doctor, Thomas." But the soldier grabbed his hand, his fingers hot and damp. "No, Jacob. If you bring a doctor, they will find me. They will take me as a deserter. Or worse, they will shoot me on the spot." "But you could die," Jacob cried, every part of him protesting the trap they were in. Thomas only smiled sadly. "Then I will die. But at least I will die free, not in chains." That night Jacob lay beside Sarah, listening to her quiet breath, but sleep would not come. His thoughts droned like an angry hive. He was hiding a sick soldier, while lives in his community guttered out one after another. Elias Miller's suspicious words thundered in his head, and doubt gnawed his soul. Had he, without meaning to, brought disaster upon his people? Could the sin of one soldier he sheltered out of pity become God's punishment for them all? The next morning Elias Miller gathered the council of elders. Jacob heard of it from Sarah, who had caught the talk at the market. The women whispered to one another, glancing over their shoulders. "They say Elias is demanding an inquiry," Sarah said as she kneaded dough. "He says someone is hiding a soldier, that the Lord is punishing us for that sin." "And do you believe it?" Jacob asked, more sharply than he intended. Sarah stopped and looked at him. "I believe people hunt for answers where there are none. Sickness is sickness, not punishment." But her eyes said otherwise. She was afraid, too. That evening the elders came to the bakery. Isaac Stoltzfus, Moses Lapp, and Elias Miller. They stood at the counter, silent as gravestones. "Jacob," Isaac began, "we need to speak." "About what?" Jacob wiped his hands on his apron, trying to hide their tremor. "About the deserter. About the soldier someone is hiding." "I know nothing about that." "Are you sure?" Elias stepped forward, his eyes hard and merciless. "Because I have seen you, Jacob. Seen you take home more bread each evening than your family needs. Seen you slip into that little storeroom." Jacob's heart stalled. "I keep provisions there." "Then you will not mind if we look." The silence weighed like a stone. Jacob looked at the elders, and they looked at him. He could refuse. He could say it was his private property. That would only confirm their suspicions. "Of course," he said at last. "Look." He led them to the far corner of the bakery. His heart pounded so loudly it seemed everyone must hear it. He opened the storeroom door. Thomas was not there. Jacob stared at the empty corner, unbelieving. The blanket lay on the floor, neatly folded, but the soldier was gone. Elias peered inside, then pulled back in disappointment. No one here. I told you, Jacob said, barely able to get the words out. When the elders left, he locked the door and slid to the floor. His hands shook so badly he could not still them. Where was Thomas? How had he known? And most of all, where had he gone? The answer came at midnight. Jacob woke to a soft tap at the window. At first he thought it was the wind, but then he heard it again 3 times, deliberate. He rose, wrapped a shawl around his shoulders, and went out. Thomas stood on the threshold. He could barely stay upright, braced against the wall. How did you? I heard voices, Thomas whispered. I slipped out the back window, hid in the woods. But Jacob, he coughed, and Jacob saw blood on his hand. I will not last long. The sickness. Come in, quickly. They went to the storeroom. Thomas dropped onto the blanket, breathing hard. His face was ashen, his lips blue. Why did you come back? Jacob asked. You could have fled. To where? Thomas smiled faintly. I am dying, Jacob. I do not want to die alone in the woods like an animal. He coughed again. I want someone to remember my name, for someone to know I was here. Jacob sat beside him. For the first time in days, he felt no fear, only vast, endless exhaustion. I will remember, he said softly. Death harvested with relentless method. By the end of the week, 23 people had died. Among them were 3 children, 5 elders, and young parents. Funerals happened every day, sometimes 2 in a day. The cemetery on the settlement edge swelled with new graves like a diseased body covered in sores. The mood in the community shifted. Fear turned to despair, despair to anger. People searched for someone to blame, and Elias Miller knew whom to name. He started whispering at funerals, at meetings, at the market. His words were poison, slowly soaking into people's hearts. God is punishing us for a hidden sin, for the soldier, for the sin of war. Until we find him, until we purify ourselves, death will not stop. At first people waved him off, but with every new burial his words gained weight. Pain and grief make people blind to reason. Jacob saw neighbors' looks change. They had greeted him warmly before. Now their eyes were suspicious. Someone spread a rumor about the extra bread he carried home, about how he hid in the storeroom. Sarah grew afraid. Jacob, what is happening? She asked one evening when they were alone. People are whispering. They speak about you. I hear them. It is nonsense. Then calm me. Tell me you are not hiding anything. He looked at her, at the face he had loved for 20 years, and he could not lie. Not to her. I cannot, he whispered. She stepped back as if he had struck her. Lord Jacob, what have you done? I saved a man's life. A soldier? You are hiding a soldier. Jacob was silent. You know what they will do when they find out. Sarah's voice shook. They will cast us out. We will lose everything. The community, our home, our life. I know. And you still. He is dying, Sarah. He will be gone in days, maybe hours. His wound is healing, but the sickness will take him. Sarah turned away, her shoulders trembling. Then let him die, she said, voice gone hard. Better him than us. They were the most terrible words Jacob had ever heard from her. It was Sunday, time for service. The community gathered those who could still walk, who were not yet ill. Their faces were gray and drawn. Death sat among them, invisible but palpable. Isaac Stoltzfus stood before them, the old Bible in his hands. Brothers and sisters, he began, we are being tried. The Lord is testing our faith. The Lord is punishing us, someone cried from the back. Elias Miller rose. Punishing us for a sin we conceal. A deserter, a soldier, the embodiment of violence and war, he is among us somewhere, and until we find him, Death will not stop. A murmur swept the room. People nodded, whispered. That is superstition, Isaac said firmly. Superstition, Elias turned to him. 26 dead in 2 weeks. 26, and you say it is coincidence? It is an illness. It is killing people across the country, across the world. But we are set apart. We are God's people. We should be protected if we live righteously. If God does not protect us, then we have lost his favor, which means someone among us is a sinner. Elias slowly turned and pointed at Jacob. And I know who. Silence fell, absolute. I have seen him, Elias went on, seen him carry food to the bakery at night, seen him hide. He is harboring a soldier. He is hiding the sin of war. Every eye swung to Jacob. He sat still, feeling the weight of those looks heavy, accusing, afraid. Is it true, Jacob? Isaac asked quietly. Jacob rose slowly. His legs trembled, but he forced himself to meet the elder's eyes. Yes, he said clearly. A wave of shock rolled through the room. Someone gasped. Sarah, beside him, covered her face with her hands. I found a wounded soldier at my bakery 2 weeks ago. He was at the point of death. I could not leave him to die. You broke the law, Elias cried triumphantly. I saved a life. The life of a killer, the life of a man who brought war into our home. War was in our home long before this, Jacob said calmly. You just did not want to see it. Isaac lifted his hand for quiet. Where is he now? In the bakery. He is sick. He is dying. Then we will go there, now. They filed out elders in front, the community behind. They walked in silence, only the crunch of gravel underfoot breaking it. Jacob walked in the middle, feeling like a prisoner, though no one held him. At the bakery, Jacob opened the door. He went straight to the storeroom. Thomas sat on the blanket, back to the wall. His face was so pale it almost glowed in the half-dark. His eyes were closed. His breathing was ragged and labored. Thomas, Jacob said softly. The soldier opened his eyes. He saw the people in the doorway, many people with heavy, unwelcoming faces. So this is it then, he whispered. The elders stepped in. Elias came first, looking at Thomas with disgust. Deserter, fugitive, the sin of war. I am not a deserter, Thomas said weakly. I am a man who could not keep killing. It makes no difference. You are a soldier. You brought your sin into our home. Sickness does not sort sinners from the righteous. Thomas coughed, blood touching his lips. It kills all the same. This is punishment because of you, because Jacob hid you. Isaac Stoltzfus knelt in front of Thomas. He looked into his face for a long moment. What is your name, son? Thomas Weaver. Thomas Weaver, do you understand what Jacob has done for you? He risked his life, his family's life, his place in this community. Thomas nodded faintly. He is a good man. He broke our law. Your law says killing is a sin, Thomas said, and suddenly his voice strengthened. Is leaving a man to die not a kind of killing? Jacob saved me. He did what his faith told him to do, what you all claim to believe. Elias jerked Thomas by the collar. You will not preach to us about our faith. Elias, enough, Isaac thundered. But it was too late. The sudden movement, the strain something in Thomas gave way. He sucked in a sharp breath, his eyes flared wide, and blood welled from his mouth. Elias let go and stumbled back in horror. Thomas toppled onto his side, his body shuddering in convulsions. Jacob, Isaac cried. Jacob lunged forward, lifted Thomas's head, and cradled it on his knees. The soldier stared up at him, eyes wide, bloodshot. Forgive me, Thomas whispered, for everything, for bringing trouble into your life. You did not bring trouble, Jacob said, gripping his hand. You reminded me that being human matters more than any law. Thomas smiled faintly. Then his eyes emptied, and his hand went slack in Jacob's. Silence. So quiet the world seemed to hold its breath. They buried Thomas Weaver in the Amish cemetery despite Elias's protests. Isaac Stoltzfus insisted every human being deserves a decent burial. The grave was simple, without a cross, without adornment, only a wooden marker with a name and dates. Jacob stood by it long after everyone else had gone. The council of elders met the next day to decide Jacob's fate. He sat before them, calm, resigned to his sentence. "You have broken the law of the community," Isaac said. "You hit a soldier. You lied to us." "Yes." "Do you understand the consequences?" "Yes." Silence. Then Isaac said, "But you also saved a life. You showed mercy where others would have shown indifference. And if our faith does not allow mercy, then what sort of faith is it?" Elias leapt to his feet. "This is unacceptable. He must be punished." "He is already punished," said Moses Lap, the third elder, who had not yet spoken. "Look at him. He has lost his peace. He has carried this burden for weeks. That is a punishment harsher than any expulsion." After long debate, the council decided Jacob would remain in the community, but for 3 months he would not take part in the common services, a period of isolation for reflection and repentance. It was mercy, and Jacob knew it. A week after Thomas's death, the sickness began to ebb. Not because some curse vanished, only because the influenza moved by its own mysterious course, taking some and sparing others. By the end of November, another 8 people had died. Then the deaths stopped. Life began to find its ordinary rhythm again. Sarah did not speak to Jacob for a week after Thomas's burial. She did her tasks in silence, coldly, as if he were a stranger. But one evening, as they sat at supper, she suddenly began to cry. "I was afraid," she said through tears, "afraid of losing you, afraid they would cast us out, and I said terrible things." Jacob took her hand. "You spoke from fear. Fear makes us say and do what we do not mean." "You did the right thing," she whispered. "I hated it then, but you did the right thing." 2 months later, Jacob received a letter. The postal service brought it, a rare event. The envelope was scuffed, the address written in a shaky hand. The letter was from Thomas Weaver's mother. "Dear Mr. Miller, I learned what you did for my son from the chaplain of his unit. He told me that Thomas did not die as a deserter, but as a man someone cared for and laid to rest with dignity. I do not know how to thank you. Thomas was my only son. I feared he would die somewhere far away, nameless, forgotten. You gave him what I could not peace in his last days. The chaplain said Thomas was seeking redemption, that he could not keep killing. I do not know whether God will forgive him for desertion, but I pray he will see his heart. Thank you for your kindness. You showed mercy when the world had forgotten him. With respect and deep gratitude, Mrs. Margaret Weaver." Jacob held the letter in his hands a long time. Then he folded it and slipped it into his pocket. That evening, after work, he walked to the cemetery. He sat by Thomas's plain grave. The moon shone through the bare branches, casting dappled shadows across the ground. "Your mother knows," he said softly to the grave. "She knows you did not die alone, that someone was with you." The wind rustled the branches like an answer. Jacob sat there a long time until the cold worked through his clothes. When he finally rose to leave, he felt something strange, as if the heavy burden he had carried all those weeks had grown a little lighter. Not gone, but lighter. Years passed. The war ended. The Spanish influenza became a memory, terrible, but a memory. New children were born, new families formed. Life went on, as it always does. But Jacob Miller never forgot that November of 1918. He never forgot the young soldier with gray eyes who sought redemption. He never forgot the hard choice between law and conscience. Sometimes, while he kneaded dough in the dark before dawn, he thought of that first day he found Thomas on the threshold. How easy it would have been to turn away, close the door, pretend he had seen nothing. But he had not. And despite all the pain, fear, and consequences, he knew he would do the same again. Because sometimes being human means breaking the rules. Sometimes mercy matters more than law. Sometimes you must hide the sin of war to save a soul. The end. Hit like, and don't forget to subscribe. The next story will be even more intense. But if you are under 18, don't even think about clicking next.